So what if financial success has less to do with how smart you are and way more to do with how you act? That's the core idea from Morgan Housel's incredible book, The Psychology of Money, and we're going to unpack it right now. Let's dive in.
Okay, to kick things off, let's look at a real-life paradox. On one hand, you've got Ronald Read. He was a janitor, no fancy financial training, and he left over $8 million to charity when he died. Then you have Richard Fuscone, Harvard MBA, a top executive at Merrill Lynch, who went bankrupt. Seriously, how is that even possible?
Well, the answer really boils down to this single powerful idea from Housel himself. Doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. Think about that. It's not about complex formulas or spreadsheets, it's a soft skill. It's all about psychology.
All right, so let's dig into our first big section here, brains versus behavior.
So how can this actually be possible? Well, it's because managing money isn't a hard science. It's not physics, right? There are no unbreakable laws. It's a soft skill, and it's guided by our psychology. It's messy. You could be a total genius, but if you lose control of your emotions, your greed, your fear, you can be an absolute financial disaster. But on the flip side, a totally ordinary person with just a few key behavioral skills like patience, they can become incredibly wealthy.
And that brings us to our next big idea, which is so important for understanding all this. It's the concept that no one is crazy. Basically, your personal experiences with money don't just inform your worldview, they pretty much create it.
So have you ever wondered why smart people can disagree so much about money? I mean, you can have two brilliant people stare at the exact same chart, the exact same data, and walk away with completely opposite conclusions. What's going on there?
Well, it's this no one's crazy principle. Here's the deal. Every single financial decision a person makes, it makes perfect sense to them in that moment. It's based on a story they're telling themselves, a story that's been shaped by their own unique personal experiences with the economy. Your life story is way more powerful than any textbook.
Let's make this real. Imagine you were born in 1970. During your teens and 20s, the stock market just exploded upwards. So of course you're going to think stocks are an amazing investment. But what if you were born in 1950? You would have watched the market go absolutely nowhere for your entire young adult life. You'd be way more cautious, right? And here's the key. Neither of you is crazy. You just experienced totally different realities.
And it's the exact same thing with inflation. If you were born in 1960, you grew up with prices skyrocketing. It's burned into your brain. But if you were born in 1990, prices have been pretty stable your whole life. Inflation is just this abstract concept. Again, no one's crazy. You've just been playing on completely different fields.
But it's not just about our personal experiences. There's another huge factor we have to talk about, and that's the role of luck. Because as we'll see, nothing is ever quite as good or as bad as it seems. You see, luck and risk are basically siblings. They're two sides of the exact same coin. They're this constant reminder that every single outcome in life is guided by forces that are completely outside of our individual effort. It means not all success comes from genius, and not all failure comes from being lazy. Let's talk about Bill Gates. The guy's obviously a genius, right? But he also had a 1 in a million dose of pure luck. In 1968, he just happened to go to one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer. Think about those odds. That one lucky break was absolutely critical. Without it, who knows if Microsoft would even exist?
But then there's the flip side of that coin, risk. Bill had an equally talented friend named Kent Evans. They were going to start this company together, but Kent was hit by a 1 in a million dose of risk, a fatal mountaineering accident before he even graduated. It's the same invisible force, the same 1 in a million odds, just pointed in the opposite tragic direction. Okay, so we've talked about our personal biases, we've talked about luck, but there's another huge psychological trap that trips people up, especially rich people. And it's all about the enough goalpost, and why it's so hard for some people to just stop. There's this amazing story about the author Joseph Heller. He's at a party hosted by a billionaire, and someone points out that this billionaire made more money in a single day than Heller's famous novel Catch-22 made in its entire history. And Heller's response was just perfect. He said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." Man, that just says it all, doesn't it? And if you want a cautionary tale, just look at Raja Gupta. This is a guy who was born into poverty, an orphan, and he clawed his way up to become the CEO of McKinsey. He had a net worth of $100 million. He had made it. But it wasn't enough. He saw his friends becoming billionaires and he wanted in. So he risked everything on insider trading and ended up in prison.
This is exactly what Housel calls the cycle of more, and it's so dangerous. Here's how it works. First, you get some success, but then you immediately start comparing yourself to people who have even more. Suddenly, what you have just doesn't feel like enough anymore. So what do? You take bigger and bigger risks to try and close that gap. The problem is, the goalpost just keeps moving further and further away. It's a game you can't win.
So with all these psychological traps, what's the solution? What's the real engine of wealth? Well, it turns out it isn't some secret formula or being a genius. It's much simpler than that. It's patience. It's the power of time.
Housel uses this great analogy of ice ages. Think about it. An ice age isn't caused by one super cold winter. It happens because you get a few summers in a row that are just a little bit cooler than normal, so not all the snow melts. That tiny advantage, that little bit of leftover snow, compounds over centuries until you have glaciers covering entire continents. You don't need a huge force to get huge results. You just need a small advantage that can compound over a very, very long time.
And of course, the ultimate example of this is Warren Buffett. His net worth is what, something like $84.5 billion? It's just a staggering number. And we all think of him as this genius investor, but that's not his real secret.
Check this out. This is the mind-blowing part. Of that $84.5 billion, a whopping $81.5 billion of it was earned after he turned 65. Let that sink in. Almost all of his wealth came after the traditional retirement age. Our brains are just not wired to understand that kind of compounding.
I mean, look at this chart. It's just wild. The bar for his wealth up to age 65 is tiny compared to what happened after. It shows you his wealth wasn't built on a few brilliant high-risk moves. It was built on pretty good, consistent returns that were just sustained for an incredibly long time.
And that's really the whole story. Yes, his skill is investing, but his secret is time. He's been doing this since he was a kid. If he was just a normal guy who started investing at 30 and retired at 60, even with his skills, we would have never, ever heard of Warren Buffett. His real secret weapon is time.
And that really brings us full circle, back to where we began. Markets change, technology changes, but our own human psychology, our fear, our greed, our tendency to get swept up in the crowd, that stuff doesn't change. It's like that old Voltaire quote, "History never repeats itself, man always does." Ultimately, the most important lessons about money aren't about finance. They're about us. They're about psychology. So the most important skill isn't in a textbook. It's right there in the mirror.